Good. Well, thanks for coming out here today. I'm Lael, I'm the village president, and anybody that knows me knows I'm a history buff and try and research as much data as I can on the area. So Karen asked me to come in and give you a short history of some fun facts in Dundee. Hopefully I'll come up with some things that you haven't heard before, and hopefully you guys won't have to correct me and tell me I was wrong or something. Most of this information comes from the Dundee Township Historical Society, as well as what is probably the definitive history of the area, which is the history of Kane County that was published in 1905. Unfortunately, it's no longer available. There's copies in the Newberry Library, but if anybody's interested, you can find it online, and it's a great resource. So I've titled this today, A Short History of East Dundee and Other Random Useless Facts. You might have noticed a lot of renovation and rebuilding in East Dundee lately. These renovations are keeping the spirit and history of the town alive by embracing the character and architecture of the existing structures. It's an exciting time for us as we grow, and to do that properly, we need to understand the history of the village so we can keep what makes us great. Let's start with a brief history of why there is an East Dundee. In 1832, soldiers were shipped to Fort Dearborn in what would later become Chicago, and then sent by wagon and foot to the Rock River. After the short war, which saw the brief military service of both Abraham Lincoln and Jefferson Davis, the soldiers returned to the fort and were shipped home. Since the eastern coast of the U.S. was settled and all the land had been taken, many of these soldiers returned to stake their claim to the beautiful land they had just passed through, land that was still owned by the federal government. Traders and trappers had set up camp here, but the first settlers who stayed were Joseph Russell and Joseph Newman in 1834. Russell's cabin was located just south of the present Hager Pottery, and Newman's was in West Dundee. West Dundee was platted in 1836 and East Dundee in 1837. The first election in Dundee was in 1836, and there were 18 votes for positions of justice and constable. Now, I'm not going to go into a whole lot more dates here because I don't want this to sound like a history test. There will be a test afterwards, so make sure that you remember.
I can slow down.
Yeah, okay. East Dundee almost started with a fist fight. While some early settlers made claim to the land, Tom DeWeese claimed all the land that was available. In order to qualify for a claim, you had to build an improvement, which could be as simple as a fence. He didn't. In 1838, Eaton Walker started building a cabin on land in East Dundee. DeWeese sent his people to stop the work, who refused. When tensions started to grow, Eaton Walker went to Elgin and returned with the only constable. The court records at the time provide one of my favorite quotes. The result was a fight in which clubs were freely used and heads bruised. DeWeese pulled a fence post, Walker pulled a knife, and DeWeese left the field. Walker was charged, acquitted, and then found to be the legal owner of the claim in court. And it's been happy times ever since. First notice of the town of East Dundee was in 1840, the same year that the village, or that the land came up for sale from the U.S. government. We voted for incorporation in 1887, and the vote was 41-0. The buildings that surround us have an interesting and unique history, and the people that built them were certainly unique characters as well. Here's a few historical facts about the town that some people may not be aware of. Hager Pottery was started in 1852, built to take advantage of the high bluffs on the east side of the river, which were filled with clay deposits. Does anybody remember the high bluffs on the east side of the river? I'm pretty sure they're all gone now. When the Chicago fire burnt most of the wooden buildings in the city, Hager was quick to ramp up its brick-making operation and send brick to Chicago for rebuilding. Many of East Dundee's historic buildings, if you see the yellow brick, that's Hager brick. Most of the buildings across the street, for example. The bluffs, the wide valley of the Fox River between the Dundees, as well as the ravine areas of East Dundee, were caused by the last glacial retreats between 10 and 15,000 years ago. The ravines and hills are terminal moraines of the glacier, or where the glacier stopped and retreated over and over again. Alan Pinkerton built a cabin in West Dundee in 1843, and as constable arrested a counterfeiting ring located on an island just north of Dundee in the middle of the Fox River. Pinkerton went on to start what is now the Secret Service and was famous for stopping an assassination attempt on President Lincoln. He used his fame to found the famous Pinkerton Detective Agency. The major industry in the early days here was milk and cheese, as the land was found to be excellent grazing for dairy cows. In fact, Barrington Avenue at Springcrest was known as Cheese Hill. When the railroad came to town, its primary function was to move dairy products to Chicago and beyond. The brick buildings on River Street were built in 1855 by Alfred Edwards. Those buildings all originally faced east, but when the railroad came to town, the shop owners moved their entrances to the west side to face the railroad. The building architecture is considered commercial vernacular in the Italian Renaissance style. Today they would just be considered office buildings, I think. Borden Dairy, who invented both condensed and evaporated milk so that it could be canned and stored without spoiling, had a large operation on Water Street just north of town, which is now also being renovated by Otto Engineering. Later in life, it was known as Milk Specialties, and along with Hill Nursery in West Dundee, they used German prisoners of war for labor during the war years and up until the late 1940s. People at the time that walked past said they looked just like anyone else except for the uniforms that they had to wear. Van's Custard, which recently underwent a complete interior renovation, is a historic 1940s gas station. The apartment building just behind it was the Bauman Hotel. It was located on the corner where the Van's Custard is, and it was moved south to accommodate the construction of the gas station. So that building is still there. 10 East Main was once the home of Doane Chevrolet, the premier Corvette racing shop in the Midwest. Doane was one of the 3 test shops for Chevrolet where they would receive top cars and racing parts and build them for Meadowdale Raceway and some of the premier race car drivers of the 50s and 60s. Because Corvettes were really not factory built for racing, they had to build their own brakes and carburetors at the shop to handle the needs of the race teams. One of the corners at Meadowdale Raceway was named Doane's Corner after Dick Doane, the founder. If you've ever admired the ducks on the river, they are there because of another local legend. Harold Hartel, a world-renowned duck decoy carver who lived on Water Street, first relieved non-migratory ducks on the river in 1930 so that he could study them. The ducks that people feed on the river today are descendants of those that Harold first brought to Dundee. River Lee's, Carol's Corner, Rosie O'Hare's, and Bandito's have been taverns since they were built in the 1800s. Bandito's was once owned by Biddy and Ma Staler, who opened a barbecue stand and beer garden in the back. The new owner has slightly more ambitious plans for the beer garden, and those renovations are almost complete. Across the street, another building is undergoing massive renovation. This building was Rakehouse Town and Country Home Furniture and is the future home of Blues Barbecue. It seems Ma was onto something with the beer garden and barbecue idea. Diamond Jim's was built as a blacksmith shop in 1865 and first became a tavern around 1900. The Anvil Club was also a blacksmith shop built in 1875. In 1956, a group of locals bought it and converted the rough building into a private club for dining and drinking. A recent renovation has brought it back to much better than new condition. It is now open for lunch to the public on Fridays. Made to Measure, located at the corner of River and 72, was built as a Buick and Pontiac dealer in 1930 by David Haverkamp, owner of the blacksmith shop that is now the Anvil Club. David apparently saw the handwriting on the wall and switched from making buggies and wagons and got into that newfangled automobile craze. With its recent renovation, the building is true to its original design, yet holds a state-of-the-art engineering company capable of competing internationally. While David might have had a clear vision of the future, the current location of Scooby-Doo's and the Measuring Cup on Barrington Avenue couldn't apparently make up their minds, as they once housed a Standard Oil station and a blacksmith shop next door to each other. Santa's Village is one of 3 built. The other 2 were in California. Built in 1959, it is still in operation today after a complete renovation and reopening in 2011. It was intended to be a model for a nationwide rollout of amusement parks, but it was the last one built and the only one still surviving. It is truly one of a kind park, and its renovation honors the history while embracing the future. East Dundee and West Dundee have, since the beginning, been separate towns. Early maps sometimes are labeled Dundee due to the township name. In 1956, the towns wanted to merge, but West Dundee voted against it. In 1962, it was brought up again, but this time East Dundee voted against it. Today we stand separate but together in our vision to enhance our value to residents and visitors and embrace our history while moving forward. So those are some of the reasons we are what we are and why we're still here. Our goal as the village is, just like all these historic businesses undergoing renovation, to embrace our history and to build upon it. While we are in an exciting time of revitalization and growth, we will always keep our small town feel and character. We're not going to forget our past. We intend to honor it and all that came before us and made East Dundee the treasure that it is today. Thank you.